Hello everyone and welcome back to the Grandchester being played in Croatia in Zagreb. It is Magnus Carlsen versus world champion Gukesh, or we should say world champion Magnus Carlsen versus Gukesh, as Magnus is world champion in Blitz. And this is round 4. It has not gone great for Gukesh, who started with a 4-point lead, but he lost his first 3 games in Blitz. And now if he loses another one, that will be enough for other people to catch up to them. Magnus, not so much, as he's still trailing by 1.5 points, but Duda definitely has a chance to catch up to him. And it's a very rare line, interestingly, of the Berlin defense that Magnus already played a couple of times. Gukesh has not, at least not in top-level events, or maybe he has when he was younger. But here, it's not going to be simple, because Magnus already played against some very strong players. He played it in London Chess Classic in 2012 against none other than Viswanathan Anand, and he played it against Sergei Karyakin, I think, in 2017, and he defeated Karyakin in this line. So let's check it out and see what this is all about. So Magnus opens with pawn to e4. We have pawn to e5. This is now blitz, not rapid, as you can see the situation on the clock, and it's a very, very specific time format. It's 5 minutes plus 2 seconds increment. And a lot of people were saying, Yasser in particular, that it's a very weird format, because for him, Blitz is less than 5 minutes. So either 3 plus 2 or anything, but it cannot be 5 plus 2. So, okay, but yeah, in this day and age, having an event at this level played without increment, I think, pieces would just be flying all over the place. But still, I do prefer without increment. Okay, we have knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to b5, Ruy Lopez is on the board. We have knight to f6, the Berlin defense, pawn to d3, and bishop to c5. And here, pretty standard is pawn to c3, bishop captures on c6 is the second most popular option. Sometimes, fairly rarely, people castle, and there are a couple of other moves that you could consider. But bishop captures, or rather knight to c3, the move that Magnus played, is very, very rare. And like I said, he has played it against Anand, he has played it against Karyakin. One player who uses it quite often is Fabiano Caruana, but as I've seen in the database, not with very good results. We have castles kingside, and only now the delayed bishop captures on c6. Okay, we have d captures. This is one of those cases where, even though you are taught capture towards the center, this is better here to capture away from the center, as the queen has clear access in the game, and the bishop can also enter the game right away. We have bishop to e3 and the bishop to d6, and as black wasted the tempo, white also will now waste the tempo. Bishop to g5, reaching exactly the position Magnus Carlsen had against Karyakin in 2017. It was also a blitz, but it was a World Blitz Championship, where Karyakin played rook to e8. Here, however, Gukesh plays pawn to h6, which is the top move recommended by the engine. And, of course, it is now, as of move 8, that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Magnus plays. Bishop to h4. Gukesh strikes with bishop to g4. It's a move that maybe gives white a little bit too many options. He can just play h3 and get the queen into the game. You should go something like queen d7, b6, a5, and get the rooks to proper squares. Here, Magnus just gets a very easy move to play. So pawn to h3. Now you could go back, but then Magnus strikes with pawn to g4, and you already have a target here. I mean, g5 will come at some point. So bishop captures on f3. We have queen captures on f3 and bishop to e7. Bishop captures on f6. We have bishop captures and pawn to g3. We have queen to d7, pawn to h4, and bishop to e7. Castles kingside by Magnus. If you are thinking about f5, you are not wrong that it's a great move. It's just not maybe a great move in this particular moment, because after f5 you can capture, and then queen g4 is somewhat annoying for black. So instead, Gukesh goes bishop to c5. Bishop is beautifully placed on this diagonal. So Magnus says, nope, I'm not having my king on g1. Plus, at some point, the h-file might open up. I might play g4, g5, open up if you capture, the h-file opens up. I want to get my rooks into the game via the h-file. So a multi-purpose move. We have bishop to d4. I imagine trying to trade knights, as Gukesh has played the entire opening, just trading everything. Magnus declines it. He invites bishop captures on b2, but here would be a little bit dangerous. You just go after the bishop, and after bishop d4, you will trade, let's say, captures, and capture on b7, and then white gets his rooks on the b file, and you have these nice targets on the queen side. So would be good for white. So after knight e2, bishop back to b6 by Gukesh. It's Kasparov mentioned in the live coverage that it's obviously it's not a terrible bishop, but it's not doing all that much. The king will move from g1, and the pawn will move from f2 at some point, and then the bishop is just a pretty picture. So pawn to g4 by Magnus, not just preparing pawn g5, but also saying I might bring a knight to g3 and then to f5. Could be very relevant. Pawn to g6, Gukesh says not so fast, plus he wants to have a flexible pawn setup. If Magnus pushes the g-pawn, he pushes the h-pawn. If Magnus pushes the h-pawn, he pushes the g-pawn. Knight to g3 by Magnus, and queen to e7. Asking about the h4 pawn, rook to h1, and now rook 8 to d8. Finally, the rook gets into the game, and Magnus strikes with pawn to a4. He wants to play pawn to a5, of course, so Gukesh stops at pawn to a5, queen to e2, preparing to push the f-pawn, and rook to d6. The rook is nicely placed on the 6th rank as a defender. Also, you can remaneuver it to f6 if needed. Also, you can double up on the d-file if needed. So, again, very nicely played by Gukesh. Queen to d2. Now putting pressure on that h6 pawn, king to g7, and pawn to h5. And Gukesh doesn't close the position now, of course, with pawn to g5, because, I mean, look at this. I hope none of you were considering that. So he has to play queen to g5. He offers a queen trade, and Magnus happily accepts. We have queen captures, h captures, and knight to f1. And this is what Kasparov meant, most likely. The bishop here will not be doing all that much. Rook to f6 was played on f3. So the rook here, again, not doing all that much. The bishop not doing all that much. And the knight has a lot of potential. Knight to d2 followed by knight to c4. Sometimes maybe knight to b3 in some lines. But from c4, the knight will be looking at that a5 pawn and the e5 pawn for the rest of the game. And it's on a light square. It will not be possible for Gukesh to challenge it with any piece. So rook to f4. And here, just h captures on g6. We have f captures on g6 and rook to h3, getting another defender to that f3 pawn. Now it's time to move the rook and perhaps double up on the h file. We have rook to h8. Gukesh offers a rook trade, and with this move, he blunders the game. It's not easy to find the move here for black, because Magnus's moves are easy. He just gets the knight to c4. He can go something like rook a3, rook b3. He could double up on the h file, whereas Gukesh has to simply react to what Magnus does. And you should probably play something like bishop to d4, then bring the rook to f6 and try to hide your king on e6, something like that. And then maybe something like rook to h7. You will be able to counter the rooks on the 7th rank. So it's not easy. And also Gukesh is much lower on time. But he played rook to h8, and now Magnus instantly captured. Rook captures, king captures, and knight to d2, preparing knight to c4. We have rook to f6, knight to c4. Now look at this. Those two pawns are a huge target, and Gukesh just has to, have a passive rook and a passive bishop to defend them. We have rook to b1. Magnus now preparing pawn to b4. He wants to blast through on the b file. Gukesh stops it, but also with it, he frees up the b5 square, which means that Magnus can now, he probably most precise is rook to a1. You go rook a1, rook to a3, rook to b3, rook to b5, and you pick up the a5 pawn. There's nothing black can do about that. But I think Magnus went to rook to h1 check because he can always go back, and he just wanted to check what Gukesh will do, or maybe to get Gukesh to burn more time. He's already down to 30 seconds on the clock. So king g7 was played, and now king to f2, as the bishop is now really doing nothing. And like I said, if Gukesh repeats king to g8, if he doesn't allow the rook on the h file, then Magnus would have to find this maneuver and just win the a5 pawn and play that kind of a game. But instead, Gukesh played bishop to a7. He's inviting knight captures on a5, and then he wants to free up the bishop with c4 check and then trade on d3 and activate his game this way. And everyone in the commentary thought that, okay, now you have to move the king or something. Obviously, you cannot capture and allow the freeing of the bishop, but that is exactly what Magnus played. He played knight captures on a5, pawn to c4 check by Gukesh. We have king to e2, captures with the king, and rook to d6 with check, and now king to c4. Magnus not afraid of anything. He's just marching forward and still threatening. Knight captures on b7 is coming. So rook to a6, he's trying to trade pawns. Knight captures on b7. We have rook captures on a4 with check, pawn to b4. We have rook to a6. Now comes rook to d1, and going after the black king. We have rook to c6 with check, king to b3, and bishop to d4, trying to maybe pull off some tricks with rook coming to c3, but Magnus just goes rook to d3. We have king to f6, and now pawn to c3, kicking away the bishop, and the king to f6 was a very, very unfortunate move for Gukesh, because now after bishop to f2, Magnus just plays rook to d7, and that king is a little bit trapped. King to e6 sort of frees the king, but the king safety, isn't your main problem here. However, Gukesh played rook to b6, and he allowed a mate in 3. So, or rather, it's a mate in however you want, but only the first move is important. So have at it. What did Gukesh miss here? I'm only kidding. I know you guys see it right away. He missed knight to d8, and there is no defense against rook to f7 checkmate. Whatever you play, you have to play some silly moves like rook captures on b4. That's why, it's a mate in 3. But, of course, it's really just the first move that matters. But Magnus didn't do that. Magnus played rook captures on c7. And here, I believe Gukesh lost on time, or he just figured, okay, there's really no point in playing this because Magnus has 2 connected pass pawns. I will just resign. So I didn't catch the end of the game, so I don't know. But regardless, it's a big miss by Magnus. But yeah, with 3 seconds on the clock, you're not going to be looking for checkmates. But I know you guys found it, and for that, I congratulate you. So yeah, big win for Magnus, not only in terms of he lost the classical game to Gukesh, he lost the rapid game to Gukesh, so, at least now he doesn't lose the Blitz game to Gukesh, and this was the first day Magnus's wife also accompanied him to the playing hall, so she was also watching from the audience, probably give Magnus a little bit of, extra luck, so to say. So that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. A very tough start for Gukesh. This will be 0 out of 4 for him. And with 5th round being played, I think he's playing Radić next. And it was a tough game against Radić in Rapids. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I will keep you guys informed. And I'm not going to upload as many of as they play. Of course, it's Blitz. It would be, silly. But if you have a nice gem that you would like to see, of course, use that hashtag suggestion. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. A big congratulations to Magnus. Better luck next time, as Gukesh will face Magnus once again. It's a double round Blitz section. I would like to thank James Sanderson, Guillermo Ismael Garcia Borges, Benjamin Hojberga, Nikola Nenad Stankovic, and Eric Vasquez for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.